On the line with me, I'm fortunate to have my guest. He is Alan Buchanan, and Alan is a principal with commercial real estate broker Lee and Associates. Alan specializes in commercial and industrial space in Orange County. And also, Alan is the host of the Tuesday Traffic Tips, short little weekly videos providing insight into commercial real estate. And also, he is a former guest, actually episode number 2 of Commercial Real Estate Pro Network CREPN Radio. And excited to have him back. Alan, how are you doing?
Darren, I'm doing terrific, man, and it's great to see you, hear your voice, see your face. As I mentioned, I had a chance to visit your fair city a couple of weeks ago. We had a brilliant time. I love Portland.
Now, when the sun's shining and the temperature's right, it's a fun place to be. It's been kind of a hellacious last year. The winter was a winter for the records as far as just kind of cold, wet, and snow, and my furnace was running through June, middle of June anyway. So we're happy to have summer, and glad you enjoyed the visit up here. But before we jump into our conversation today, Alan, if you could do myself and the listeners a favor and tell us a little bit more about you and your practice, and take a minute to do that.
Sure. Thank you for that opportunity. So I've been selling commercial real estate, and I specialize in industrial real estate, manufacturing companies, distribution companies, service companies. Been doing it since 1984, doing it all with Lee and Associates. When I started with Lee in 1984, we had 2 offices, and now we have over 60. So it's been really cool to watch the exponential growth of the company. We're now a national company. We're now coast to coast. We're looking to open an office hopefully in the Pacific Northwest in Portland later on this year. So maybe you'll start to see some Lee and Associates signs up that way. But I spent 5 years in the consumer goods business, and it took me 5 years to realize that as your responsibility grew in the consumer goods business, so did your geography, which meant I had to be on an airplane 3 days a week. Little baby boy, married, that wasn't working. So we looked to find something where we could stay local and not have a cap on our income potential and, in effect, be our own boss. And this is what we decided on. And I say we because it was definitely a joint decision. I mean, I know you're in a similar industry, Darren, and you know how the commission sales world works. So it was a monumental leap for us to go from a corporate position with a company car and company benefits to, hey, you're on your own. Here's your Rolodex. Get busy. But it's been a great ride. Commercial real estate business, although it ebbs and flows, if you are careful to make sure you live on less than you make, it can be a wonderful business and can provide you freedom. And I've never missed a Little League game, and now we have grandkids and starting to really enjoy their activities. So it's been a great ride, and I'd recommend it highly to those that are interested in a career where you can be your own boss yet not have a lot of employees and not have a lot of inventory. So
awesome. Well, speaking on commercial and industrial real estate, and kind of recognizing that the economy is trucking along here and growing, and growing businesses need a space to operate. I was hoping we could talk a little bit about what and how either a tenant looking to buy space to operate from. So maybe an operator whose business has grown and needs more space, and considering their options. And maybe we just keep it at that, how they could best prepare themselves to engage a commercial real estate broker like yourself, so that they could get the outcome they were trying to achieve.
Sure. I believe at the very core of that question is you really need to look at 2 things. You need to look at the marketplace, and then you also need to look at your company and what the long-term goals of the company are. And let me just spend a minute and talk about both. So if we look at the market, in Southern California in particular, our industrial vacancy is at an all-time low. 98 of every 100 industrial buildings are occupied, which means 2 are not. And if you are an owner occupant or a tenant going out into the marketplace to try to find a new home, you're going to be very, very sadly disappointed at the alternatives that exist. They're very few. It's older inventory. They have issues, and it's just not a great time, candidly, to be looking to relocate. And this from a guy who makes his living helping owners and occupants find buildings, or helping owners find tenants or buyers. It's a real difficult time in our marketplace because of that lack of existing product, if you will. So I like to say it's a great time to sell commercial real estate. It's really not a great time to buy commercial real estate, because if you're an owner occupant, you own your own building, you occupy it, you run your business out of it, you've outgrown it, now you need to sell it or look to do something else, chances are that upleg property where you're going to relocate is not available. Or if it is available, it's going to be incredibly expensive. So you really have to look at the market cycle that we're in now. The second thing I would suggest you look at is you look at the type of company you are. In other words, some companies are more suited to own their own building versus others. You and I talked offline about an injection molding company that I sold a building about 25 years ago. That building is now worth $5 million. The business that the building houses is worth $1 million, and they paid $1.5 million for the real estate 25 years ago. So you can see what's happened in that period of time, and that appreciation. They were a classic example of someone who should own their own real estate. They'd been in the business over 5 years. There wasn't the pressing need for operating capital to inject back into the business, pardon the pun. They were of an age that were right on the borderline, like we discussed, of where they could take advantage of the appreciation of the 15, 20-year appreciation that the commercial real estate would bring. They had somewhat of a sticky requirement, meaning they had a tremendous investment need for power and for things that you don't want to have to reproduce every 3 to 5 years. And last but not least, they were very, very financeable, and they were somewhat they were somewhat stable in the space that they need. In other words, the amount of space. Now, if you take all those reasons and then you do a flip side analysis of that, if you're a company that you plan to outgrow your building in 3 to 5 years, boy, I would not recommend you buy a building right now. If you're a company that's been in business less than 5 years, so therefore you don't have a great profit track record, leasing's probably a better way to go. Obviously, if you're a publicly traded company, a lot of publicly traded companies don't like the depreciation on their balance sheet for real estate, so they're better served leasing. And the last thing I'd suggest is if you're a company that can benefit from the commodity of industrial real estate. In other words, let's say you're a warehouse distribution company. You don't need a lot of office, but you need clear height, you need truck turning radius, but there's a plethora of that sort of space available. Then owning might not be the best alternative for you. So number one, look at the market, look at the particular cycle we're in. Number two, look at whether you are truly a candidate to own or whether you'd be better served leasing for a period of time.
So let's just say that we're a tenant, we're growing, we've been in business 5 years, we're looking at our long-term horizon, and we see it being longer than 15 years as far as our need. So we've essentially gone down and we've checked all the boxes, and we're in a tight market. If I was wanting to look at buying a property, what would you recommend? I mean, as far as what are the ducks in a row now that we've gone down this kind of list of needs, and I feel like my business is going to be going on for another 15 years easy. We'd like to own the ground, kind of thing. How would you recommend that that type of a prospective buyer proceed with a commercial real estate broker?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey is a guy I listen to on the radio quite a bit, and Dave refers local providers of services based upon what he calls a teacher's heart. In other words, someone that is a Darren Gross, an Alan Buchanan, that's happy to give time and share wisdom. I like to believe I share wisdom. I know you do, but I would suggest that someone looking to jump into commercial real estate do a couple things. The first thing I'd suggest is if you're in a market that's fairly robust like Southern California, chances are you're getting called by commercial real estate brokers every day. And so I would suggest picking out 2 or 3 of the calls, maybe someone that's been consistent in following up with you, maybe someone whose sign you see everywhere. Invite them in, have a conversation with them, and see how much of their time, effort, and wisdom they will share with you. If they're not willing to invest an hour to come look at your building, talk to you about your plans, why you're looking to buy a building and what your current situation is, chances are they're probably not your guy or gal. If conversely, that broker is willing to spend some time with you, share some wisdom, give you some good points without the overriding, hey, when do I get paid sort of message, then probably they are your guy or gal. So I would say first and foremost, find that person. And once you find the person, give them the assignment to help you find a building. Don't make them get up earlier than their competition to give you a building that really doesn't work for your requirement. Saddle up with them. If you have to sign an engagement agreement with them for a period of time, do that. That way they can best serve you. Because once again, you found someone who has a teacher's heart, whose primary concern is your well-being as opposed to his or her own well-being. So that's what I would say first and foremost. The second thing I would suggest is find out if the company is financeable. Chances are you have a business banker that you have a relationship with, but your business banker is not necessarily your best source for building financing. Most small business owners these days finance the purchase of commercial real estate through the SBA, the Small Business Association. There are a couple of types of SBA loans. One's called a 7A, one's called a 504. And when you have these meet and greet with the 3 or 4 brokers you're going to interview, ask them about financing, see how knowledgeable they are, see what they would suggest. If they're really worth their salt, what they're going to tell you is, yeah, business banker's great, but you're best served by finding a mortgage broker who can then take your package to a number of different lenders, not just to one bank. And that way you end up getting the best value in terms of interest rate, service, loan to value, all the rest. So it's really a matter of you got to find a service provider that you know, like, and trust, and then secondarily find out if the business is financeable.
I like it. So if we proceed, we find our broker, we engage, we go and have the conversation with a lender, a mortgage broker, or establish a financing conversation. What kind of a time frame would you expect the process to take from the initial conversation to finding a property?
Sometime between a year and 2 years from when you actually want to do something. I've obviously run processes quicker than that, but given the short supply of inventory today, if you're out looking and trying to get this accomplished in much less than a year, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage. You have to remember that you're starting from zero. You've not done any investigation on financing. You've not assembled any packages to get yourself financially qualified. You've not looked at any buildings. You've not looked at any trends. You have an idea that maybe you need a 20,000 square foot building. In reality, you might be best served taking the existing lease premises and figuring out a way to better utilize those for another 3 to 5 year cycle. So you're really starting from scratch. The typical loan process takes anywhere from 60 to 75 days, and that's if you've got all your information together, your tax returns, your personal financial statements, your cash flow reports, anything that a lender is going to require. So if you've got all that together, you can get a lender started today. You're talking 60, 75 days, because every deal is going to involve an appraisal. Every deal is going to involve an environmental report. Every deal is going to involve some sort of physical inspection, and those things take time. So 75 days. And then how long are we going to take to actually search out the correct property? Maybe that's a 60, 90, 120-day process. So now all of a sudden you can see I'm up to 6 months in conducting this process. And then last but not least, you might find a building that's perfect for your needs, but in fact, the reality is you probably aren't going to find a building that's perfect for your needs, which means you're going to have to do some work to it. If there's any sort of wrinkle with the use that you plan to put the building, then you're going to need to get some sort of city direction in terms of, is my use acceptable? Am I going to have to upgrade the building for disabilities? Or am I going to have to upgrade the power? Is the sprinkler system sufficient for my high pile storage? All those kinds of pertinent issues. So you've got 90 to 120 days of search time. You've got 75 to 90 days in terms of an escrow time. You might have a misfire in there where you settle up with a building and it turns out it's the wrong building and you end up canceling the escrow. So I'd plan for a couple of 30-day wrinkles in there. And then maybe you've got 60 to 90 days in terms of ramping up and getting the building ready to roll. So you can see that this process can easily consume 8 to 12 months, and that's if you're very, very well organized.
No, I think that's one of the things that I think often I guess kind of catches me when I think about, how long it actually takes to get something out of the ground, if you're going to start new construction, just from a standpoint of you got a bare ground and there's, through the planning and the permits and financing and all that fun stuff. And it, like you say, though, trying to find the right fit for your property, for your needs. I think it's useful to have some sort of a realistic time expectation as opposed to, well, our lease is up in 90 days.
Let's go out and buy something.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
Yeah.
And frankly, we don't deal in the market that I'm most constantly in, which is Orange County, the western part of Riverside County, eastern part of Southeast Los Angeles County. We don't deal with a lot of ground up construction. I would say in markets where you do deal with ground up construction, take the time frame I gave you and multiply it by 2.5, unless by chance you're in the state of Texas, and then you could probably get it done in 12, 15 months. But I like to tell folks, if you're considering building a building, you need to at least have 2 to 2.5 years, and that's if you own the dirt. Now, if you don't own the dirt, add another 6 to 9 months to that, because our cities and counties and municipalities have gotten so squirrely in terms of what they require of new construction. It just practically doesn't even make sense to consider it. Plus, your cost to produce tends to be much higher than what you can buy an existing building. Even in this day of very, very, very low inventory, it still is very difficult to make new construction more economical than existing buildings.
No, I got it. It is. I think just the surprising of the timeline. It boggles the mind sometimes when you think about it. But I think in any kind of planning, if you don't have a realistic expectation of the time it's going to take, you're going to be disappointed or abandon it if you don't have some sort of a realistic gauge on what it's going to take.
And I would put that on my, and maybe we can spend a minute and talk about this initial interview you're going to have with your 3 or 4 folks that have been steadfast in contacting you. What should you ask them on that initial meeting? And I would start by saying, what is it that you do? How do you do it? How long have you been doing it? How many assignments exactly like mine have you completed? And if the guy sort of fumbles around and can't come up with 3 or 4, in other words, let's say you're in a 20,000 foot building and you're looking to double in size, how many 50,000 square foot sales have you accomplished in the last year? Now, he doesn't need to have done 50 of them, but I'd sure as heck like to see him do a half a dozen, because then he's going to be able to dial in specifically as to what you're going to encounter out in the marketplace. I'd ask him, like we mentioned, financing. What are the various means of financing my purchase, and see how he or she responds. The other thing I would ask he or she is, look, I'm thinking about buying land, building a building versus buying an existing building. What do you think about that? And once again, from sitting on the other side of the table, what that suggests to us is it's going to be 2 to 2.5 years if this occupant buys a piece of land, builds a building. It's going to be 2 to 2.5 years before I, broker, cash a paycheck.
Right.
And is broker going to be willing to invest that time and effort? A lot won't. I mean, a lot will say, I got to get paid in 60 or 90 days. This isn't worth my time. You're going to be able to tell that very, very quickly. And then the other thing about buying a piece of land versus buying an existing building, let's use our 50,000 foot building as an example. That means the guy is going to need to buy somewhere between 2.5 and 3 acres. Okay, so pick the market. In my market, land sells for $35 a square foot. If I sell him 3 acres, that's 130,000 square feet, $35 a foot. You can see that's a $4 million purchase on the land. I don't typically get paid on the building that's constructed on the back end. Whereas if I sell them a 50,000 square foot building, those deals today are selling for about $200 a foot. So that's a $10 million sale instantly versus a $4 million sale of the land. So watch how he or she responds to that question, because it's going to tell you an awful lot about the patience with which that practitioner is going to be willing to deal with your requirement.
I think you bring up an interesting point, and maybe this kind of goes even to the networking value, or the value of your network in commercial real estate. Just that the lead time and that time involved in actually getting a deal done. And also probably goes to the reason why so many brokers do present deals to their existing network first, as opposed to putting it out in kind of an MLS mode, like on the retail or residential side of things.
Correct.
And
right. And there are a couple reasons why that happens. The first reason that happens is and I'm talking about Southern California. It can differ based upon markets, but in Southern California, as an example, when a residential agent accepts a listing, they are governed by a board of realtors. And that broker must, in fact, populate that board of realtors multiple listing service with any new listing, or they get bounced out of the board. And the last thing you want to do is get bounced out of the board, because that's where all your inventory information originates. Commercial's different. We don't have boards of realtors that we report to. Most commercial inventory is controlled by 2 or 3, rather large practitioners, CoStar being one, Xceligent being one, and there's some local MLSs that we deal with in Southern California. But we give them the information, but we're not beholden to give them the information with any finite period of time. And so what a lot of brokers will do, if they have something available, they're going to ship it out to, like you said, their network of folks, the buyers that they've been contacting and talking to. They're then going to probably ship it out to a geography surrounding the existing assignment, and then they're going to put it in the multiple listing service. And because of the way our inventory, our lists of available buildings are provided to us, that's why that happens. And you're absolutely right. A lot of times, the good deals never make it to the market because they get snapped up by someone that I know that's looking for that size building.
Right. Let's. I want to back up just one step here. We're talking about, so we've got the prospective buyer, tenant that's outgrown their space. They've decided that they want to buy. Can you speak to some of the benefits? And I know you hinted at the one client that you have that you sold a building. I think 25 years ago or whatever, for $1 million, now it's worth $5 million.
Sure.
Can you speak to the benefits there of just the ownership a little bit?
Absolutely. So the long-term appreciation has to be one of the tops in terms of a benefit. And when I say long-term appreciation, plan to own the building 15, 20 years, even at a robust market like we're now with values at the peak, that real estate is still going to be worth more in 15 to 20 years, unless you happen to hit a dip. But chances are that real estate, very good chances are that real estate is going to be worth significantly more 15, 20 years from now. So long-term appreciation is one of the biggies. The next benefit would be the depreciation. So currently, if you lease commercial real estate, your business writes that expense off as an ordinary business expense. Now, all of a sudden, if you create an LLC, if the LLC owns the building, the operating company continues to lease it. The operating company is still paying rent to an entity. It just happens to be an entity that you own. The entity that you own, the LLC, can then depreciate the building over 39 and a half years. And it's typically about 75% of the value. So hypothetically, if you've got a building worth $5 million, then you are depreciating 75% of that over that 39 and a half years. And you can do that simple math, and that has the ability to offset the quote unquote rent that your operating company is paying to the LLC. So the depreciation is huge. The other thing is there's such great long-term financing available right now. The SBA offers a 504 program. That's 2 loans. The first loan is through a bank, and that's for 50% of the price. The SBA comes in with a debenture to back up that first of 40%. So you're able to finance 90% of your purchase. The 40% piece, which is the debenture piece, has 20-year fully amortized fixed interest rate rates today of approximately 4.5%. So you're financing that purchase long term at a fixed rate, which causes your occupancy costs to be much, much more stable than trying to time a lease renegotiation. Have a client right now signed a 10-year lease in 2008. A year after he signed the lease, unfortunately I didn't do the deal, or I'd probably be his former broker, but a year after he signed the lease, the market rates collapsed, and he was paying 65 cents a foot, and then the market rates collapsed to like 50 cents a foot. Well, now the market rates have ratcheted back up to where he's paying close to what the market is. But had he signed, 2 5-year leases as an example, he would have benefited from a below market rent for the last 5 years. When you own a building, all that sort of dip and turn is stabilized, so you don't really have to worry about if you can afford it the first year, and you can look in your crystal ball and say the business is going to be able to afford this for the next 15 to 20 years. That stabilization is great there. So those are really the 3 biggest benefits of owning: depreciation, appreciation, and you really stabilize your occupancy costs.
No, that's awesome. Alan, I'm kind of looking through my list of questions here, and the only thing that I'm before we close, I'm just thinking, is there one best piece of advice you could give somebody that's considering moving from a tenant to an ownership position?
One piece of advice, I still hearken back to that: find a practitioner with a teacher's heart that will spend time with you, educating you, even if there's not an instant paycheck on that horizon. And we're out there. Obviously, you're that guy. I'd like to believe I'm that guy. There are an awful lot of brokers in the market that are just looking for a quick hit, looking to sell you a building as quickly as they can, not really concerned about your long-term company's growth and stability. I contacted a company who's become a real good long-term client of mine back in 2009 when our market was at its depths. And he said to me, I really want to buy a building. He had 2 years to go on his lease. Perfect. We struck up a relationship. I discovered he lived in a part of Southern California called the Inland Empire, although his building was in Orange County. And I said, why on earth do you have a building in Orange County when you live in the Inland Empire? And he says, well, part of it is I moved from here to here to here. And I said, well, you can save yourself, a couple of hours a day in drive time, which is going to add years and years to your life. So let's start looking in the Inland Empire once again for purchase. And at the time, he was looking for a 50,000-foot building. At the time, he could have purchased a 50,000-foot building in the Inland Empire for $2.5 million, $50 a foot. And we looked, there were a bunch of alternatives available. So we looked and looked and looked and looked. And one day he calls me and he says, I am just really uncomfortable tying up that much capital in purchasing a building. Now, mind you, we were talking about $250,000, this for a company that was doing $10 million in annual revenue. So it wasn't really, looking back, that significant amount of an investment, but it was. And I said, well, if you're having doubts about doing this, why don't we shift and find you something to lease? Let's wait till it's the right time. Now, what that means in my parlance is I went from a $2.5 million sale and the appurtenant fee to probably a $500,000 lease and an appurtenant fee. But guess what? It was the right move for him. Now, flash forward, we've done 2 renewals, and we're currently looking for him something to buy. But all of a sudden, that 50,000 square foot building is not $2.5 million anymore. It's more like $6 million. But he feels comfortable buying a $6 million building today where he didn't feel comfortable buying a $2.5 million building 7 years ago. I have a long-term client. He's happy as a clam. And I will eventually sell him a building or not. But he has referred business to me. He's one of my best friends, and that's the kind of broker you need to find. Someone that is going to be invested in your long-term success, and also is looking to become a trusted advisor, not just a salesperson looking to make a quick deal with you.
I like it. I words to live by. I think that trusted advisor and a teacher's heart. I like that. It is interesting if you take the time and educate people. And I've had it people come back years later, say, you told me about something years ago, and they come back. So I think that's a good path to take. Alan, what's the best way for listeners to find out more about you or get in touch?
Sure. So easiest place to find me would be Allen, ALLENC, Buchanan, BUCHANAN.com. That's my website. It's got all my contact information. I write a blog called Location Advice. If you Google Location Advice, I believe the site for that is allencbuchanan.blogspot.com. I'm very out there on Twitter, Facebook. I have a Location Advice Facebook page. You can find me via Tuesday Traffic Tips. I'm pretty easy to find when it comes to having a fairly robust social media and digital footprint.
Well, and I will attest to that and encourage all the listeners to check out your Tuesday morning traffic. What is it? Tuesday morning?
Tuesday Traffic Tips.
Tuesday Traffic Tips. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes there.
Yeah, please do. And that's been a real love. I thoroughly enjoy doing those. As I told you offline, we have our first sponsor on the Tuesday Traffic Tips, which is exciting. So,
no, that's awesome.
Some said, Buchanan, you sold out. Well, in fact, I did, but I happen to passionately believe in the product, and I use it myself. So maybe someone can benefit.
Well, hopefully it works for you, works for them, and it's like I said, the content is what I see. It's you've always got a little nugget of something that is useful there. And
and the interesting thing is, you sell insurance. I sell commercial real estate, similar but yet vastly different. Yet you are a subscriber to the Tuesday Traffic Tips, which is interesting. So that's maybe the one thing that I didn't realize would occur, which is sales professionals of all genre watch those things. My marketing associate, Josh's dad, who does something completely different in the sales world, watches those things on a weekly basis with his team. And so when I hear stories like that, it just gives me a real warm, fuzzy feeling inside.
That's awesome. Hey, Alan, thanks again for taking the time, and look forward to doing it again soon.
It's my pleasure, friend. You have a great rest of your summer, and if I can ever return the favor, please let me know.
You got it. For our listeners, if you like the show, share it with someone you know that might find this useful, and share Alan's story. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.